Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by and welcome to the GNS Science media briefing for the Whakaari White Island eruption. I would now like to hand the call to your speaker, Mr. Graham Leonard. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Graham Leonard. I'm a senior volcanologist from GNS Science. I apologise for the lack of video on this call and the delay starting. This is a Whakaari White Island eruption briefing. I'd like to start by expressing our profound sympathy for the families and friends of those who died yesterday, and for those who are still waiting for news of their loved ones. Since the eruption at 2:11 p.m. yesterday, no further eruptions have occurred. Seismic activity has dropped to low levels, but we are still seeing localized steam and mud jetting from the active vent area. Our monitoring equipment is operating, and we are continuing to closely monitor the situation on the island. Over the next 24 hours, we estimate there is a 50% chance of a smaller or similar-sized eruption, and therefore a 50% chance of no eruption. That's over the next 24 hours. We estimate a larger eruption is unlikely. However, it's important to note this is a highly volatile environment, and any predictions have to be seen in that context. There is an extremely low likelihood of any ash impact to the mainland, although it's possible gas may be smelt depending on the wind direction. We've collected additional airborne gas, carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide data today, and this will help us work out what the volcano is doing now and what will happen next. So now I'll take questions.
Thank you very much. For your participants, if you wish to ask a question, please slowly press 0 followed by 1 on your telephone and wait for your name to be announced. That is 0 followed by 1 on your telephone keypad. Thank you. Your first question is from the line of Heather. Heather, please introduce yourself. Thank you. Hello, Heather. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
It's Tessa, not Heather. I have a query. I understand it was level 2 before the eruption. How often does a level 2 occur, and how often does it result in an eruption?
Right, that's a good question. So our volcanic alert level system was revised in 2014 to include both a level 1 and a level 2 in terms of unrest or pre-eruptive activity, and then levels 3, 4, and 5 correspond to small, medium, and moderate and large eruptions. So we've had instances in the last 5 years, since 2014, where we've gone to level 2 with no subsequent eruption. It is also possible to have eruptions occur from level 1, and in both cases, level 1 or level 2, it's possible to go to an eruption with no imminent warning.
So what's the strike rate, I guess, of a level 2 going to an eruption or not going to an eruption? Should there have been warnings, level 2, no one should approach the island, or...?
So the specifics of giving life safety advice is the jurisdiction of response agencies and emergency management. In terms of the volcanic alert level system, we operate a 5-level or a 6-level scale from 0 to 5, and the setting of the alert level indicates the level of unrest. So in recent weeks, we'd moved to volcanic alert level 2, which is moderate unrest, indicating that we'd noticed monitoring parameters had increased, and that's linked to messages in our volcanic alert bulletins as well, indicating that the volcano appears to be more active, and there is perhaps an increased likelihood of eruption.
Thank you.
I do apologize for that, Tessa. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that is 0 followed by 1 on your telephone keypad and wait for your name to be announced. That is 0 followed by 1 on your telephone keypad. We have a question. Please go ahead and introduce yourself. Hello, your line is open. Please go ahead and introduce yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, this is Rachel Bennett from the Wall Street Journal. I was just wondering, do you have any interaction with the people that receive your alerts? I think you have something like 100,000 people sort of signed up to GNS. How often do they come to you for advice on whether or not they should, say in this instance, be visiting White Island?
Yeah, no, I understand the question. Thank you. We interact a lot with our emergency management stakeholders. So our main role is to provide advice both during quiet times and when activity is increased, and in cases like this where we're in eruption, to responding stakeholder agencies. And that includes local, regional, and national emergency management especially. And we meet with them regularly, and we work with them on response planning advice around the science advice. Our specific purpose is to explain the volcano, to understand the way we monitor it and the way our alert bulletins and our alert levels can convey the current status of the volcano and what might be happening. So we have those meetings regularly at all levels of emergency management. And I believe the alert bulletins, which carry the alert levels, are conveyed through the national emergency management system when they're released to all of those stakeholders.
And when was the last time that you had one of those sort of conversations? And would it be at a sort of local level in terms of being in Whakaari?
Yeah, right. So from a local emergency management point of view, I would say we're discussing volcano preparedness on a weekly to monthly scale, depending on the volcano. Obviously, in the Bay of Plenty, there are also other volcanoes down through Rotorua, through Taupo as well, and we're regularly engaging on a weekly to monthly scale around many aspects of the volcano, and including talking to them about monitoring arrangements.
But you have those sort of legislative powers, do you, in terms of policing this sort of thing? And I guess this is a private island that we're talking about.
Yeah, right. I understand. Yeah, so the question is around management of the island. So it is a private island. Any aspects of response through emergency management are definitely with the emergency management agencies. So we definitely do not have a role in that area. That's a question for emergency management.
Hi, does that answer your question, ma'am?
It does, thank you. Yep.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that is 0 followed by 1 on your telephone keypad, and wait for your name to be announced. Our next question is from the line of Michael Daly. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, hi. Hey, I was just wondering if there were any indications before the eruption to show that it was about to happen.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I guess the most important aspect here is the volcano. The volcano's been in a period of unrest on and off with eruptions since about 2011. Most recently, in recent weeks, we'd seen increases in the monitoring parameters we're looking at. That includes seismicity and volcanic chemistry. And so we had released volcanic alert bulletins, and including an alert level change in the lead up. So I guess we had certainly seen an increase in unrest, to moderate unrest, in recent weeks, and communicated the increased activity and the increased chance of an eruption that goes with that. I guess the really important factor is this. This is a very active volcano. It has a large hot water and steam hydrothermal system near the vent, and that's got a lot of heat driving it from a magmatic system below. So the eruptions of the scale we saw yesterday can occur suddenly, as they did yesterday, with virtually no immediate precursor signals, because it's just a destabilization of that very active steam and pressurized water system near the surface.
Okay.
Sorry, Michael, does that answer your question, sir?
Oh, yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Once again, it is 0 followed by 1 on your telephone keypad, and wait for your name to be announced. We have a follow-up question from the line of Tessa Ackerman from the Australian. Please go ahead, ma'am.
My question was similar to Michael's, so that's fine.
No problem. Happy to answer clarifying questions though, if that helps.
So what you mentioned, almost no precursor steam activities, or what would have? Were there a little bit for this one, or what would you look for?
Yeah, that's right. So I guess the key thing with these small, we call them phreatic type eruptions, where it's basically an eruption of steam and hot water. The destabilization can just happen suddenly, and that appears to have been what's happened here. The majority of those type of eruptions of the scale we saw yesterday happen with no precursor signs that we're seeing from seismicity or monitoring data. It's the reality of a very active volcano, I guess. So we're monitor. I guess part of your question is how we go about our monitoring. So we've got quite a broad team in our monitoring in our GNS volcano monitoring group, and the main tools and the main expertise we have is around seismicity. So understanding the earthquakes that come from the volcano and from the fluids moving around and the tremor attached to that. Also monitoring any ground deformation that might be occurring. We've got visual monitors with webcams, and we're also monitoring temperature and chemistry. All of these can give indicators, and we're seeing indicators of change at the island over recent weeks, and that went into the volcanic alert bulletins and the raising of the volcanic alert level. But we're not in a position to see those things are not changing in that short time frame right before an eruption. So yes, there were forecasts in recent weeks of an increase in monitored signs, but that doesn't translate into us seeing immediate changes straight before the eruption, if that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that is 0 followed by 1 on your telephone keypad, and wait for your name to be announced.
Do you want to just repeat the initial statement, Graham?
We may have had some people joining us. If we haven't got anyone asking questions right now, I can repeat that initial statement for anyone new who's joined. I'll leave that to you, Eddie, to monitor who's logged in.
Certainly, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just repeat the statement that I started this briefing with. Good afternoon. My name is Graham Leonard. I'm a senior volcanologist from GNS Science. Look, we apologise for the lack of video on this briefing, and there was a delayed start as well from a technical point of view. This is a Whakaari White Island eruption briefing. I'd like to start by expressing our profound sympathy for the families and friends of those who died yesterday, and for those who are still waiting for news of their loved ones. Since the eruption at 2:11 p.m. yesterday, no further eruptions have occurred. Seismic activity has dropped to low levels, but we're still seeing localized steam and mud jetting from the active vent area. So our monitoring equipment is operating, and we're continuing to closely monitor the situation on the island. Over the next 24 hours, we're estimating there's a roughly 50% chance of a smaller or similar sized eruption to what occurred yesterday. And there, of course, that means there's about a 50% chance of no eruption, and that's in the next 24 hours. We also estimate a larger eruption is unlikely. However, it's important to note this is a highly volatile environment, and any predictions have to be seen in that context. There's an extremely low likelihood of any ash impact to the mainland. Although it's possible, gas might be smelt depending on the wind direction. That's quite normal. We've collected additional airborne gas, that's carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide data today, and this will help us work out what the volcano is doing now and what will happen next. So, like before, I'll now take questions and pass back to Eddie.
Thank you, sir. As a reminder, if you wish to ask for a question, please slowly press 0 followed by 1 on your telephone keypad and wait for your name to be announced. That is 0 followed by 1 on your telephone keypad. Our next question is from the line of Julia Hollingsworth from CNN. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Thanks for taking our questions today. So I understand that the process with this whole monitoring process is that GNS, gives the rating, and then it's up to the individual tour groups to decide whether they want to go to the island and run the risk. I'm wondering if you can tell us anything about how they come up with those internal policies. Are those sort of decided with GNS, or do they consult with volcanologists when they're coming up with those internal policies?
Sure, no, I understand that question. Those type of procedures are entirely within the bounds of the operators themselves. They do communicate with emergency managers at the regional level, and so really that question is for the regional emergency managers and the tour operators themselves. We certainly do have some interaction around describing the volcano and the volcano status and our monitoring process and how we give advice on what the situation is and what might be coming in the future from a scientific point of view. But those procedures are all, they're all responding agencies and with those operators themselves. So that's where that question needs to go.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So I talked to a volcanologist today who was telling me that this rating process is very complicated and he spent a lot of time explaining it. Is it possible that the way that New Zealand has been rating volcanic activity needs to be reassessed, or that there's a problem with this rating itself?
Well, we certainly we keep a keen eye on the framework and discuss it with our emergency management sector. The current volcano alert level system has been in effect since 2014, and I think I mentioned earlier, you might not have been on the call yet, that we revised the system in 2014 with extensive stakeholder engagement to include two unrest levels, 1 and 2, and that's at levels without any eruption happening, and then you have levels 3, 4, and 5 for small, moderate, and large eruption. So it's certainly a system of scale, both in terms of unrest without eruption and eruption, that stakeholders are very used to and have been involved with helping us develop. And another key point here is the alert level number itself is a very coarse mechanism to give a heads up for a status change in the volcano. The bulk of the information about what's happening and what might happen from a scientific point of view is in the volcanic alert bulletin that goes with any alert level change, and we also release a lot of alert level volcanic alert bulletins within an alert level, even if that level hasn't changed, to update on any new data or any new forecasts. So a lot of the detail needed for responders is in the bulletin that goes with the alert level. Again, the alert level is a very coarse numeric just indicator of a status change, and so there's a lot more description and discussion beyond that alert level.
Okay. One final question. On Monday, obviously, there was a status 2 rating. Would you have gone to White Island yesterday?
Right. Well, so we don't have any field work planned this week, or did not have any field work planned this week that I'm aware of. But like the question we had before around plans and procedures and decision-making for an agency, we've got our own procedures from a risk point of view for going onto the island, and we certainly were aware that the activity had gone up, and we can manage that through a variety of approaches, either not going there or controlling how close we're going. But because we were not actively doing anything on the island or planning to do anything on the island this week, we were not making that decision for ourselves.
Mm. But GNS scientists did go in recent weeks, right, to White Island?
That's correct. Yeah, that's right. So just like any employer, we do have a framework for managing our decision making about whether we go and balancing up how much time we might be there. And so in previous weeks, we have been able to visit the island for a time.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to commandeer you completely, but if you were to take something away from this, really tragic event, what kind of things do you think New Zealand authorities or New Zealand
that's a good point.
People could learn from this?
Yeah, Well, I guess taking a step back, I mean, this is a tragic event, and our sympathy is really with the families and friends of those involved yesterday. Whakaari White Island is New Zealand's most active volcano. It's been an almost continuous eruption from 1976 to 2000, and it's been in a second eruptive episode on and off since 2011. We've seen several eruptions in the last few years on the island. Those have occurred from various alert levels. Because it is so active and there's so much energy there, it's clearly capable of erupting with no immediate precursory signals. We've had those recent eruptions in the last few years, but at those times we haven't had people have not been on the island. So it's I guess the take-home message here is this is an active volcano. It is New Zealand's most active volcano, and it has had eruptions in the last few years of a similar scale.
Okay. Okay, cool.
I guess from a monitoring point of view, it's a well-monitored volcano. We have the range of monitoring equipment and distribution on the island that follows international standard practice, volcano observatories for monitoring the situation on the volcano. And we have a wide range of expertise within the GNS Volcano Monitoring Group and with connections with our wider science community in New Zealand. So I just really want to explain that our monitoring equipment continues to be in operation, and we are continuing to actively monitor and assess the situation on the island.
So obviously around New Zealand there's a number of active volcanoes, and New Zealand's on two tectonic plates. Do you think there's just sort of an inherent danger in being in New Zealand, or is that a bit?
Yeah, I mean that question comes up a lot dealing with volcano, tsunami, earthquake, landslides. New Zealand is on an active plate boundary. We are a mostly submerged continent, and the reason the New Zealand part is sticking its head above the water is because there is a very active plate boundary cutting through the continent right here, offshore of the North Island and straight through the middle of the South Island. That's the reason we've got a beautiful country in the South Pacific, but it also comes with all the hazards that go with that: earthquakes, tsunami, volcanoes, landslides, and even flooding with such an active landscape. So we have a wonderful place to live, but we do have a very active landscape, and it's very important to keep in mind that many of these active landscape processes can be quite dangerous. And in this tragic event we've had yesterday, we've seen that firsthand.
Given that New Zealand is in such an active place, like on the ring of fire and everything, are you surprised that we haven't had more major fatal disasters?
No, I'm not surprised. I mean, we can always have any of those events I talked about. The reality with hazard events is they're not regular in time. They're kind of they're distributed unevenly in time, and so you can go through periods where you haven't had a lot, and then you can go through periods where it feels like we've had more. And it's like shuffling a deck of cards. You can have a bunch of similar things near each other. So I'm not surprised, but we are constantly vigilant, and the public need to be aware. We can have events, and we can have bigger events as well. Just passing back to Eddie, I just note the time here. I wonder if there are any other questions there, or we may need to be wrapping up in terms of the amount of time media are devoting to this.
Yep. We'll have a question from the line of Matt Chand from stuff.co.nz. Please go ahead, sir.
Matt, Stuff. Yep, go ahead.
Hi there. Thanks for your time. I was just wondering if there was monitoring for gas levels on the island following the eruption. Volcanologists said hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide could have been released. Is there any data on the parts per million that those gases would have peaked at following the eruption?
Yeah, okay, yes. So we definitely do monitor on the island. We have continuous equipment there. We also conduct gas flights and occasional trips to the island. And in all those cases, we gather data. The primary volcanic gases are water vapor, actually, and then also, as you said, hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide. Those gases are always coming out of the volcano there because it's such an active system. There is magma deep down producing gas, and it's coming up through that geothermal system. We know from the regular data that was coming in yesterday that there were relatively normal for recent weeks levels both before and after the eruption. But we've just today conducted a gas flight and gathered additional airborne gas, and we'll be processing that to get concentrations. In terms of the response, we are actively providing science advice to the responders in terms of what gas levels might be for the responders. So we do have a pathway in to provide science advice to the responders.
And so what would the normal levels then be, parts per million, for those two gases?
So we've got a diverse monitoring group, and I don't have those numbers in front of me. That would be our gas geochemists, and we've got our active monitoring meeting going on in another room next to me. So those are the people we'd need to ask. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, then.
Thank you, Matt. There are no further questions at this point. Graham, please continue. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. So at this stage, I think we've covered this for about 20 or 30 minutes, and I really appreciate everyone's attention and questions. I think I might close this question and answer session.
Just repeat that sympathy.
Yeah, and I'd just like to repeat in closing for this Whakaari White Island eruption briefing that we express our profound sympathy and concern for the families and friends of those who died yesterday and those who are still waiting for news of their loved ones. This is a really tragic event, and the impacts have clearly been quite severe. So thank you for your time. If there are no further questions, I think we'll bring the Q&A to a close.
Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our meeting for today. Thank you for participating. You may all disconnect. Thank you.